Hello everyone, June here. Today I have something special for you, something you haven't seen in this channel for the most part, with the exception of like one or two pieces of underwear that I posted last year. Anyway, I have a historical costume for you. So I have an 1890s walking outfit. And the reason that I made this outfit is because for the last, I don't know, a couple of years, actually since just before the pandemic started, I have been part of what is now the New York Historical Costumer Society. It's not actually a society, it's just a Facebook group made up of people who like to dress up, who like to make historical costumes. And anyway, last month we were supposed to have a Gilded Age themed event, but it was too hot the day that it was going to be too hot, I should say, the day that we had planned to have it. So we postponed it to June 5th, which was just last Sunday, which gave me time to actually finish the costume that I had started, because a few weeks before that, my graduation happened, my parents were here, and if this event had actually taken place on the day that it was supposed to originally take place, there was no way that I could have finished it. But I was given the gift of 2 weeks, and so I finished it, and I want to share with you today. Basically what I'm going to do is do the pattern review for the skirt and for the blouse. And I used two different patterns, obviously from two different companies, and I just want to talk to you about them. Let's start with the shirtwaist. The shirtwaist is the Black Snail Patterns shirtwaist with pleats. It is supposed to be, I think, 1890, whereas the skirt is 1898, but actually in the decade there was not a whole lot happening with skirts. It's really in the sleeves that the fashions really change. So even though the originals are, like 9 years apart, it's not a huge deal. It works. And before I actually get into pattern sizes and the sizes that I chose and whatnot, I want to say that I took all of my measurements corseted and padded. So basically with all of my underpinnings that I was going to wear with this outfit. And I think that, actually I don't think I know for sure because I say so. Black Snail Patterns, which is again the pattern that I use for the blouse, the measurements that they give you are not corseted measurements. They allow for a 2-inch reduction at the waist. So if your actual measurements without a corset is a waist, say 36, then that is the waist size you should choose, and they have already worked in a 2-inch reduction. That is not the case with Truly Victorian Patterns, which is what I use for the skirt, and I'll get to that. But anyway, according to my body measurements for Black Snail Patterns, I should have chosen a size 48 for this shirtwaist. But there is a lot of fabric in this blouse, and I decided to size down because I worried that I was just going to be swallowed in fabric, and that was actually a great move. I did end up having to do adjustments because I do for everything. One big adjustment was the neckline. The neckline on this blouse is small. It is so tiny. And I think even if I had just gone with a size 48, I would have still had to widen the neck. So after I made my first muslin, I decided that I needed a lot of space in the neckline. So I added an inch and a half, a whole inch and a half to the neckline, and that ended up still being too small. I could have done with another inch. In fact, I could do my button up on the neckline, on the very top button on the collar, but if I had done that, I wouldn't have been able to stand it for long. So I did have to wear it without that button done up. So if I had to go back, I would probably add another inch to the neckband for a comfortable fit. And I actually talked to somebody else who has made this, and I mean, like, I know I'm chubby, right? I know that my neck is probably wider than a lot of people's, but somebody who is not chubby, somebody who's, regular straight size, she said she also had issues with the neckline being too small. So it's not just me, just a heads up there. Another thing that I did for fit was to do a narrow shoulder adjustment. And normally I would like slice up the arm side and, you know, overlap things, but because there is so much gathering and so much poof on the sleeves, I took the lazy way out, and I just basically cut off fabric from the actual blouse. So once I constructed the actual blouse with the actual fabric, I marked how much I had to take off at the shoulder, and then I tapered it out to nothing just before the notches on the arm side where the sleeves is supposed to match the armhole, and that worked really well. This is definitely the kind of blouse, shirtwaist, where if you don't do the shoulders right, if your shoulders don't fit right, you will look like a potato sack because those sleeves off your shoulder, it's not a good look. So if you make this and you have narrow shoulders like me, then definitely make sure that you do a narrow shoulder adjustment, either the way that I did it or however way you decide to do it. It really needs it. The shoulder fit in this blouse really makes a huge difference. Another fit adjustment that I did was to shorten the sleeves 1.5 inches. And oh my god, those sleeves are long. I don't know what height Black Snail's dress for, but the sleeves were so long. Even with 1.5 inches taken off, it was still too long. I ended up having to compensate for my sleeves. Well, they weren't actually just falling off my arm, but they were falling, once I had the cuff and everything on, they were falling down on my hand a bit more than I would like to. So to correct for that, I ended up having to move the cuff button about 5/8 of an inch in from where they should have been, so they actually just stay at my wrist. But 1.5 inches was just not enough. And I have short arms, but they're not that short. I think it's either an issue with the drafting or just the nature of the sleeve having so much fabric there that it just makes them long. And a note on the sleeves, this is something that I guess is partly aesthetic and also partly preference. The cuffs, or I should say the placket on the sleeves, is not a tower placket. It is a continuous lap placket, which I detest. But the problem with a continuous lap placket and a sleeve that is too long is that when the sleeve settles, the placket bunches up and it folds, and it's just not, it doesn't look good. Now, like just walking around, people are not going to notice your placket, but I notice my placket, and not only do I hate making continuous lap plackets, I also don't like the way that this one splays open. There's also no buttons or anything on the placket. With the cuff that I went with, which is a slightly rounded one, there's only one button. So like there's nothing to hold that placket closed, and I don't love it. This is also a problem that the other person that I talked to about the neckline on this shirt also ran into. So she also ran into this issue with the placket just you know, splaying open when the sleeve is worn. So again, something to think about. I would have been much happier if this had been a tower placket. And I know that this blouse is actually based on an original, but still. And that's really it for fit adjustments, but I did make some changes in construction just because I thought that my method was better. In the instructions, they call for the interfacing, which is actually supposed to be broadcloth, so interfacing for the neckline or for the collar, and interfacing for the cuffs to be cut without the seam allowances. But how do you keep that interfacing, that broadcloth, cotton broadcloth, that is not in any way attached to the fabric from bunching up? So that was not gonna work for me. It just makes absolutely no sense. This is not iron on. This is just a piece of fabric sandwiched between two fabrics. There's got to be a way to anchor them, and the way that they have you do it, there is no way to anchor them. So I didn't do that. What I did instead was use a very lightweight interfacing, and I will leave a link to the one that I use. It's from, I can never remember the name of the store, Fashion Fabric Supplies or something like that. So I use a very lightweight interfacing, iron-on interfacing on both the inside collar and the outside collar. And then I also cut the cotton broadcloth interfacing, which we'll call interlining here. But I cut it with a seam allowance, so it's actually attached to the fabric. And then of course I graded my seams and I tried to make them as neatly as possible. But it just makes no sense to me to cut that without seam allowances and then just have them floating in there. I don't know how that would work, to be honest. I didn't try it and I think it would be a failure. So if you have done this and it has worked for you, let me know in the comments. And on the topic of things that don't make sense, I have to say that the instructions on this pattern leave a lot to be desired. I am pretty well seasoned in making shirts, and there were still some parts that were confusing. So I, for the most part, ignored them because, again, with construction methods that made no practical sense to me, and then the fact that there's a lot in the instructions that they're just not great instructions. And again, referencing the person that I talked to about this blouse who had also made it, she is a much newer sewist, so she's only been sewing for probably a couple of years, and she also had trouble with the instructions. So if a new person and a pretty seasoned person have trouble with instructions, so and by person I mean sewists, then it's the instructions, right, and not the people. And so that's my opinion on the. I mean, okay, let's be real here. The actual drafting is wonderful. Like everything went well together. It's just great. Problem: very small neck, very long sleeves, and iffy instructions. But moving on from the actual pattern, the fabric that I chose is a very thinly striped cotton poplin from fabric.com, and I wanted to make sure that it was light because I didn't want to be too hot, but also I wanted it to be poplin because I wanted the pleats to actually stay, like to iron on really, really well. What's gonna happen when I wash this blouse? I don't know. I'm pretty sure the pleats are not gonna be there when it comes out of the dryer. They probably won't be entirely gone, but this is the kind of pleat that you will have to keep on ironing every single time that you wash this thing. But aside with all the nitpicky things that I talked about, I love how the blouse came out. I love how it looks on me. I really like the look of the amount of fabric that the size 46 gives me. And by the way, the pattern also says to put in a lacing channel in the back of the blouse so that you can cinch it. I didn't do that. I just tucked it in my skirt and moved on. And so speaking of moving on, let's move on to the skirt, which was a lot less complicated. The skirt is a Truly Victorian pattern. It is pattern number 291. It is an 1898 walking skirt, and there are tons of, well, relative tons of people on YouTube who have made this pattern. So if you want to actually see the construction, go check some of those people out. I will leave some links in the description box. But I did actually construct my skirt a little bit differently than what the instructions on the pattern are. And the instructions on Truly Victorian patterns, by the way, are good. I just deviated from construction methods, and you'll see in a minute what I mean. So for this skirt, again, I took my measurements fully corseted. Not only corseted, but I took my measurements with my hip pad on. Under all of this, under all of the skirt and the blouse and everything, I am wearing a hip pad. One, because I don't actually have any hips of my own, so I need all the help that I can get. And two, because I wanted to give the pleats in the back, well, they're actually ruffles. The ruffles in the back of the skirt like a little boost. But anyway, I took my measurements, corseted and padded, and my hip measurement and my waist measurement, corseted and padded, came exactly at a size I, which is what I ended up cutting. Now, I am short, and the pattern says that the skirt is drafted to be 40 inches long. I took my measurements, again, padded, so over my hip pad, and I decided that before I even cut the fabric, I needed to shorten the skirt 4 inches. So that's what I did. I shortened at the bottom, every single panel. There's 7 gores in this skirt, and each one of them I took off 4 inches from the bottom. So there's a center front, and then there's side front, side back, and back. And that turned out to be the perfect amount. That is pretty much the only fit change that I made to this skirt. I constructed the skirt as the pattern calls for until it came to hemming it. And this is where I deviated. The pattern tells you to do a facing made from a heavy fabric like canvas or twill or something along those lines. I did not want to do a hem facing. Let's call it what it is. And so instead of a hem facing, what I did was actually use 4-inch wide horsehair braid for my hem. So I attached it, right sides together, folded it once, folded it again, and then just top stitched it. And I top stitched it because I did a lot of research on these skirts. In a lot of the originals, you can obviously see that there is a seam line where the hem is supposed to be. Some of them, it's obvious that it's hand done. Other ones, it is very obvious that it is actually machine done. And sometimes I even have a second row of stitching. So instead of just one where the facing gets attached to the skirt, but then a second one, I guess for decoration maybe. And also, I didn't line my skirt, which the pattern tells you to do. I didn't line it because it is summer and because my petticoat is already pretty heavy and I didn't want to wear 2 very heavy layers. And I also did a lot of research on that, and I have this little book here, which I guess is a little bit of like a sewing Bible for 19th century sewing. And in this book, we are told that by 1900, lined skirts are rarely seen. And that's all that I needed to hear to go with an unlined skirt. So because I didn't have a lining to attach my facing or my horsehair braid to, and I didn't want to take the time to do the hand sewing, I decided to just use my machine because they had machines. They did the exact same thing I did. And so why not? So do I regret it? Absolutely not. It was probably one of the best construction choices that I made for this entire skirt. And so the skirt fabric is a cotton twill, and it was perfect for the skirt. It was perfect in weight, it was perfect in texture, and I actually love how it looked with the horsehair braid. If I make this skirt again, and I probably will, I will try the facing. But maybe that would be more of a wintry kind of skirt in a lighter wool. Oh, I forgot to add that I actually put in a pocket on the skirt that it didn't have in the pattern. And if you would like to see a video about how I did that, let me know in the comments and maybe I'll think about making it. And so that is my review of these 2 patterns, and I didn't actually get good videos of me in this outfit, but there are a lot of pictures, so I will put some pictures here so that you can actually see it from the side, the back, the front, etc. And if you have made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time. Bye.